Good morning, guys. What's going on? Today, I am in the studio with my coworker, Katerina, who says that we've gotten some questions submitted from y'all in regards to stuff that buyers and sellers are asking in today's market. And Kat is catching me pre-coffee, so don't judge me too hard. What do you have for me today?
Okay, so one of the first questions is why can't I make big purchases before I buy a home?
That's a fantastic question. So, when you're under contract, like you're the buyer and you've agreed to purchase a seller's home, oftentimes when you're working with a lender, that lender has pulled your credit and they are continuously monitoring that credit. They're also requesting things like your bank statements to verify where the source of funds is coming from for your purchase. If they start seeing big purchases made on that bank statement or on credit, that can increase your credit balances and therefore decrease your score, which could affect your eligibility or your approval of the loan. I've had that situation happen a couple of times, especially when I was a former lender. It was something that I would educate my borrowers on all the time, especially if they were refinancing. I would tell them, listen, no, don't make any big purchases until after the loan is closed. Well, one of my buyers did not listen to me and he went out and bought a new Harley Davidson motorcycle. He told me about it that following Monday. Guess what I did,
Oh my
Leah? I
gosh.
know you said not to. And I was like, what did you do, Billy? And he tells me, and I was like, what's the monthly payment? Immediately had to count that as a new payment against him
Right.
in his debt to income ratio, his qualifying ratios to see that, to make sure that he qualifies and can repay this loan. And guess what happened? It immediately threw him
Yeah.
outside the threshold, making him no longer eligible to refinance. And so I had told him, I told you this for a reason. You should have
Yeah.
waited until after closing, which is in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
to buy your motorcycle. And now you can't close on this loan.
So for somebody who say does need a new car, I
Yeah.
thought that's probably the one big transaction you're gonna possibly need to make. If it's within the same year as that you're thinking of buying a house, what is the timeline of what you
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
when you should make that big
It's a
purchase
great
if you need to make
question.
that
It's a
big
great
purchase?
question. So typically, at least when I was a lender, and this might be different based on the lender you're working with, based on the type of loan that you're getting. So take this with a grain of salt. But from my understanding or from my experience, is most lenders will request your previous 2, maybe 3 months worth of bank statements,
Okay.
right? And if they see that a large deposit was made in there, they're like maybe more than the normal amount that you would have
Sure.
withdrawn, they need to verify that source of funds if it's over a certain percentage of what's normally in your bank account. If you just bought a car, that's something that you should consider doing a few months in advance before you start having credit pulls, because buying a car, that credit inquiry hits your credit, that can make your credit score drop. So it's probably not smart to buy a car and then immediately that next month try and go for a home purchase, because your
Yeah.
credit score is naturally going to be probably a little bit lower right now.
So they will
Yeah.
be asking the 2 to 3 month. That's just something
They
that's
can see it
standard.
on your credit. They
Yeah.
can see it on your credit report too. Now, if you just opened up a new loan the month before you're applying for a home, that loan is likely not going to show up on the lender's credit pull because it's too early. It hasn't, maybe you haven't even made a payment on the new car yet. So therefore there's nothing for that car note lender to report to the credit bureaus.
Yeah.
But typically a home purchase might take 2 months, let's say. And then
Okay.
when they're still monitoring your credit, maybe that new car loan is showing up right before closing. And it's like, wait,
Yeah.
you had this whole $500 a month payment. That changes the numbers. So
Yeah.
you want to plan stuff like that out accordingly. I always joke and think a lot of the big stuff happens all at once. I
Yeah.
close a lot of buyers who are getting married the next month or maybe just got married. So for couples like that, you really need to be cognizant of the big purchases and how that might affect the loan process and your qualifying score for the dream home that you're trying to get.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel that saying, like, when it rains, it pours.
Yes.
Like, it's seriously, like, that
And that's why
sounds
it's
odd,
important
but
to talk to a lender super early on. So it's like, hey, my car's about to break down. I really do need to buy a new one, but I don't want that to affect things. What do those numbers look like? Like, what monthly payment do I need on a new car to still qualify? Like, maybe
Right.
that happens while you're under contract and you need a car,
Yeah.
right? Maybe you can't wait. Tell your lender, talk to your lender,
Yeah.
and make sure that those numbers still work, but don't just like go out and buy it and hope for the best.
yeah.
You
yeah,
know?
for sure. Who decides the closing date?
Great question. So that's typically negotiated between the seller and the buyer in the contract, right?
Okay.
So a seller may or may not have a particular date in mind. And if that seller is receiving multiple offers on the property, if the seller is motivated by time, let's say these are sellers who just want to be done, like they just want to get it sold, they might be most incentivized to pick the offer that says, we can close in 2 weeks. We're all cash. We're not working with a lender. We could close possibly in 2. To that seller, that might be the most motivating. And maybe that offer is less money than they're asking for, but to a seller who just wants to sell it as fast as possible, they're not necessarily as money motivated,
Fair.
right? But if a seller is super money motivated and they just want the highest price and closing date can be further out, maybe a buyer needs it to be further out. Maybe they just found their dream home, but their lease isn't up for another 3 or 4 months. They don't want to double pay rent or a mortgage payment. So
Yeah.
if a seller isn't super pressed for time, you know, they don't have to be in their next place right away. Maybe they've got a comfortable place to stay with family for free. That seller's like, yeah, it's okay. We can wait, you know, especially if you need that time and maybe they're getting more money out of it, sort of
Yeah.
thing. So the sales price or purchase price is typically negotiated between the seller and the buyer.
And who does that, like, mediating talking between the seller and the buyer? Like,
Good
how
question.
are we communicating that information?
Good question. So if there's agents involved, then it's the agent, the real
Okay.
estate agent's doing that communication. Now, let's say the buyer has an agent, but the seller doesn't. They don't have anyone representing them. They're doing an FSBO or a for sale by owner. Then that buyer's agent is negotiating with the actual seller who doesn't have an agent, you know, who necessarily knows how to negotiate or draw up a contract or knows the ins and outs, or, you know, so who does the negotiating? If there's agents involved, the agents would be doing that negotiating together with having conversations with their client, right?
Right.
So a buyer's agent isn't negotiating necessarily without knowing what their buyer wants.
Yeah.
They are having those conversations in the background before they get
Okay.
and connect with the agent to make those negotiations.
Is it awkward? Like, why are we communicating through realtors? Like, I get it, but I also, like, is that, like, a weird thing to do if you want to just, like, talk straight up to the buyer of the house?
Sure. It's a good question. I think it just depends on the person. The good thing about it is it can keep things really clean, you know, no
Sure.
emotions involved. I could use myself as an example, right? Like there were so many things that I wanted to negotiate that I wasn't necessarily happy about upon one of my purchases. If I didn't have my agent doing those negotiations for me, I don't know that they would have been as strategic. I don't
Yeah.
know if I would have gotten necessarily what I would have wanted because I was more so coming from a place of emotion and like, this
Absolutely.
is bad, I don't want this, I want that. That's not going to motivate someone they might get their feelings hurt in the process, be like, fine, I'll go find another buyer then, you know?
Yeah.
So when you have agents who can think critically, strategically, who have the knowledge and the expertise, they understand the market, they understand how to sell a home.
Right.
You know, like that's really what works in your best favor. I think it could get awkward when you don't have agents and when you
Yeah.
are dealing with each other, because at the end of the day, if you're not an agent yourself who regularly does this, then it's just civilians, I guess, you know, trying to make the biggest legal transaction
Yeah.
work and without that layer of knowledge and expertise. So I would almost flip it back and say, I think it's more awkward when they do have to
Right.
deal directly with each other.
Right.
You know? In most cases, I don't know. I've never been an agent. I'd be curious to hear what an agent thinks about that, but
Yeah.
that would just be my take.
Right. They're like your personal PR person.
They're your they're your advocate.
Yeah.
They're representing you and your
Yeah.
best interest.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what one of the main things I've learned here is like
Yeah.
the realtor does know best. Because, I mean, they've been through it how many times?
Exactly.
Like, who else has, like, seen how many, like, home purchases?
Exactly.
So.
Now, probably not the realtor who only sells one property a year
Sure.
and it's their own property, right?
Yeah.
But a realtor who's selling 2 to 3 homes a month, who's regularly or more, regularly in the market, regularly seeing changes, yeah, that person is active. They know what they're doing.
Right. Why can't title companies just email wire instructions?
Oh, love that question because it's not safe. It's not safe. Why is it not safe? I mean, wire fraud, it's real. It's not just something people are yapping about in their email signature. Unfortunately, it's something fraudsters are really good at, and I hate to call them smart, but they're
They
smart.
are.
They're smart, and they're getting better at defrauding people or frauding people. What's the word? I don't know. They're doing a bad thing to people.
Yeah.
So we don't email them because emails are the first thing that can be infiltrated by, a fraudster trying to steal your money.
And those instructions are, like, kind of like a tutorial on, like, how to send your money from your bank. So it's like, yeah, this is not something you want on
this
this is not an email situation. This is like lockdown.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do.
And I would say for real estate agents, for buyers out there, if you're working with a title company who does send the wire instructions over regular email with no other precautions in place, I'm sorry, I'll just say it, that's a red flag. They shouldn't be doing that. Like, if they're willing to take that degree of a shortcut,
right.
they're
It's not worth
absolutely
it.
cutting corners in other areas that are meant to protect you and your clients' most important sensitive information. It's not the title company trying to make people's lives hard. I often tell people, if it's legal and it's compliant, like, we want the answer to be yes, but I'm sorry, sending you wire instructions non-securely is not something that we're going to do. It's just not safe.
Mm-hmm. And, like, also, like, trust your gut, because, like, that sounds odd.
Yeah.
Like, sending that through email. It shouldn't be so accessible.
Absolutely.
Okay, the last question
Okay.
for this area or this segment. How are title companies handling wire fraud and scams?
That's a great question. So I can't speak for title companies in general, but I can speak for Allied Title, the company we work for. And I think I can speak to what I think all title companies should be doing, right? They should not be just limiting their warning about wire fraud to consumers to that fine print that they have at the bottom of their email signature, right? We've all seen it. Wire instructions will never be changed over email, yada, yada. I mean, that's the bare minimum, right? Like, but you can't be relying on that. Title companies should be educating the clients and their clients, buyers and sellers, on how serious wire fraud is, how, like, the common tactics that fraudsters are using to scam people. That's something we do at Allied, is we send them a disclosure of those common examples that they'll see when someone's trying to defraud you, fraud you, whatever that word is, do something bad to you, steal your money. We make everyone sign that. And, when wire instructions are sent, title companies should not be sending those instructions over a regular email. It's just not smart. That's the first thing that a fraudster is going to try to infiltrate. There needs to be secure methods of how consumers get those instructions. And then there needs to be practices in place, policies for those people to verbally verify them with someone at the title company. So there's so much that title companies should be doing, but it should not be confined to just that fine print, like, wire fraud's a thing in the email signature.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, I feel like everybody gets scammed, like, once a week in regards to receiving, like, a scam email.
Yeah.
So,
think
like,
of all the times we see, like, a scam email, and thank God we've got, procedures in place, security, we've got Secret Service contacts, like, we've got the right people and the right procedures in place for if and when this does happen to people. But it is a time thing. Like, as soon as you realize that wire fraud might have occurred, you got to act now, or the chances of getting that money back, slim to none.
Right. You're like, always call, like, trust your gut. Yeah. Call if you have a question.
Be smart.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence.
Okay.
Okay, guys. So now we're going to do something. I'm a little nervy. I'm not going to lie. I think Kat's going to quiz me with some real estate terms or something. And I've got to, like, guess what the word is. Yeah. What are you going to do? Read me a definition?
Like, real estate allies version 101.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll read you a definition. And these are, I feel like, pretty simple. Like, we've talked about these real estate terms often.
Okay.
So you should...
I should know these.
Yeah.
Pressure's on.
Yeah.
Drink my coffee.
Okay. So, what is evidence that an owner of the land is in lawful possession of a property? Or of a property?
A deed or a title search.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
It's a title.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yay. Ding,
ding. Good. Okay. Next. Also, like, play along at realtors, if you're, or like anybody who's in real estate, like, play along with us.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Let's see if you guys get it faster than I do.
Yeah.
Which is very possible. It's Monday, okay?
Right.
And it's raining out and...
The vibe's not outside.
Exactly.
Okay. So what are conditions that must be met for the sale to close, such as an inspection or financing approval?
Contingencies.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that was so easy for you.
I know. That was a good one.
Yes. Okay. So what is the profit received based on the difference of the original purchase price and the total sale price?
Capital gains?
Yeah.
Yay!
And I think we just also, like, shout out to our Instagram and Facebook. We just did one on capital gains tax.
Oh, that's right.
So look at that.
Yeah, go check out that stuff. It's really good knowledge to have.
And a lot of these also, like, are from allied lawyers and attorneys. So we know what we're talking about.
No, I agree. Keep quizzing me. I'm doing really well.
Yes. Okay, what is a legal claim on a property for unpaid debt?
A lien.
Yes. That is something I learned on the first day here.
Oh my God, you learned that your first day?
Well, because you're like, this is a lien, L-I-E-N. And I was like, what?
That was first day material?
Yeah.
Oh God, so overwhelming.
Literally.
I can't believe you remembered that. That's so impressive.
Yeah, because I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
New word unlocked for me. A written instrument duly signed and executed by a person which authorizes an agent to act on his or her behalf to the extent indicated in the instrument.
Power of attorney.
Yes.
Limited power of attorney.
Yes. What made you get that?
The part that you said, to the extent of.
Okay.
But I'm also not an attorney, so I don't know if a general power of attorney also covers that. But let's just go with power of attorney.
We're not attorneys. Right. Yeah. Okay. What is an estimate, an opinion of value, or a conclusion resulting from the analysis of facts?
Appraisal.
Period.
Boom.
Okay, two more. Like I said, these were kind of easy, but again, I feel like like we need very, like, common terms.
Give me some cred.
Yes. No, these were so hard. You're getting these fast.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so what is the process of evaluating a loan application to determine if it meets the lender's standards?
Pre-approval? Can you say it again?
Yeah. So the process of evaluating a loan application to determine if it meets the lender's standards.
I should know this. I used to be this. Underwriting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I did good for being a visual person.
No, this
is...
is...
hear if I had to, like, have the question repeated, okay.
Again, a lot of fancy words. Yeah. Okay, last one.
Okay.
What is the interest or value which the owner has in real estate over and above the liens against it?
I want to say appraisal, but can you repeat the question?
Yes. The interest or value which the owner has in real estate over and above the liens against it.
Thank you. Equity.
Yes. Okay.
Sometimes second guessing yourself is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. I feel like A+.
Oh my gosh, A+, yes.
Yeah. Okay. After reading that though, equity, what's the difference between equity and an asset?
So the asset is what you would have equity in. Like, you need to have the asset to have the equity.
I see.
So the equity, like if your home is the asset
Right.
that you're building equity on.
Okay. The equity is like the money
That you're putting into the home.
Okay.
And that basically represents how much of it you own versus
Okay.
not how much of it you own, because you own the whole house, but there's also a lien against it, a debt against it. And so the home is collateralized against that debt until that debt is paid back. But the more you pay the debt off, the higher your equity in the home is built. The more the balance of the loan goes down,
Okay.
the more equity you have in the property.
Okay.
So
the
if
more
you wanted,
you own,
correct. If you
less,
wanted to refinance the property using like a cash out refinance, I used to do this all the time for a lot of my veteran clients back in the day. A lot of them would do cash out refinances where they were refinancing into a loan that was actually a higher rate than their current loan. That kind of refinance is called an interest rate reduction loan. That's someone who's trying to refinance into a lower rate to save money on their monthly payment. Someone who wants to do a cash out refinance is someone whose rate is likely going up, but they're getting thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars that represents their equity in the property.
Okay.
And I would get a lot of veterans who would say, yeah, I need money for renovations. I want to build a porch or a deck on the back of the house, or this is for my granddaughter's college tuition, or, you know, what have you. It could be for whatever they wanted, as long as it was legal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next segment, Kat has some true or false questions for me based on her understanding.
Yeah, which
as
is
a
not
Gen
much.
Z. No, don't say that. You know, just based on
Yeah.
what you know as someone who's new to the real estate sphere, gives me good insight into Gen Z's mindset. So let's go.
Yeah.
True or false?
True or false? I don't actually need to put 20% down.
That's true. You don't need to put 20% down to buy a home. There are tons of options. There are tons of options where you can go lower. I bought a home once at 5% down. I also bought my second home at 3.5% down. So there's tons of different ways to do it.
Yeah, because the 20% sounds intimidating.
So it is.
Who
can afford that in DC? Not me.
No, nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's another place where I'm coming from is, as Gen Z, that buying a home sounds intimidating. That's not going to happen, especially anytime soon.
That's not true.
So yeah,
we'll get you there. We'll get you there.
Okay. Once you're under contract, you basically have the house.
False.
Okay.
False. Once you're under contract, I'm going to explain a little bit since that was false. Once you're under contract, you're under a written legal agreement to buy the home. If there's contingencies in place that you have to meet, you got to meet those contingencies, but a lot can happen. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe you had a contingency for the home to appraise at the same amount that you agreed to purchase it for. Maybe it underappraises by like 30 grand. And what happens in that scenario? You can either negotiate back with the seller and be like, listen, the home's only worth this amount. I don't necessarily want to buy it for $30,000 extra based on the appraisal. Or you can just say, I don't really want it that much. You know, you could totally back out. But once you're under contract, you don't just basically have the house. It's not until you actually close and sign the paperwork and everything's done, then you're the homeowner. Then you have the house.
Okay. So under contract, you can still back out.
There's options to back out based on how the contract is written up.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Closing costs vary drastically by state.
True.
Okay.
True. Yeah. Every state is different. Every jurisdiction has different percentages or different state requirements, maybe county, city requirements. Those costs can differ by jurisdiction, by state, all that good stuff.
Okay. A loan is hard to get. Loaded question.
That is a loaded question. I'm gonna go with false.
Okay.
I'll say false, but with a follow-up answer. I think it sounds harder to get than it actually is. Maybe the hardest part is just getting started with the conversation and knowing what it takes for a loan to go through. But the process of getting it isn't necessarily hard once you know what you need to do to get there.
Yeah.
It really just takes finding the right lender that you feel comfortable guiding you through that process. Mm-hmm. So yeah, loaded question.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people would say true. I'm going to say false, simply because I just think it's more intimidating than it actually is.
Yeah.
It sounds more intimidating than it actually is.
Yeah. Trust your lender and interview your lender.
Yes, exactly. She's been listening.
I know. Okay, I will find my dream home online.
Maybe.
We all do that, where we look on Zillow.
Honestly, maybe. You could. I don't think it's true or false. It's honestly maybe. But I will say that if you're only looking online for your dream home, you're missing out on a lot of options that a real estate agent would be able to offer you based on their own network, their own brokerage, and there's so many different ways versus just looking on Zillow.
Yeah.
Especially for your dream property, that's just one avenue, and that's if it's even on market. There's so many off-market properties that are someone's dream home. But it takes working with a real estate agent to find those gems.
Yeah, the home buying process will take forever.
That's super fair.
Sounds like it will.
That's super fair. False. Forever. I mean, forever's forever, right? It's not going to take you forever. It might take some time, but for me, I mean, as someone who didn't think both times I purchased that I was one of these people that could, especially right away, to my great surprise, the first time I purchased, I was able to close in 30 days. And the second time I purchased, I think it was 26 days.
Okay.
So, and that was from... that was from finding the home and going under contract. There was probably a whole month leading up to that from like having that initial conversation, talking with the lender and getting that all started. So it probably was like a 2-month process from start to finish, both times for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds doable.
Not forever. Not forever.
Yeah.
Might take more time if you're buying new construction. Homes take time to build and other circumstances. If you're doing an assumption loan, that's a whole separate segment. But, it just depends on the situation, right? It doesn't take forever. False.
Yeah.
It doesn't take forever.
True or false, a bigger down payment is better?
False. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean better. I mean, if I had put down, I'll just bring it to myself. If I had put down a bigger down payment, especially on my first home, I had about $10,000 extra worth to put towards my home. I talked with my lender at the time and said, listen, I have $10,000 extra. Should I just put it towards the loan? He's like, I don't think that's super smart. And I was like, well, why not? He's like, if you have $10,000 extra to put towards this particular loan, it's probably only going to decrease your monthly payment by about $50 a month.
Oh.
And he's like, when that $10,000 could come in really handy for home projects. That home inspection of yours wasn't absolutely perfect. You've already mentioned there's some things you want to do. Maybe that's $10,000 you could dip into on a tougher month where expenses are higher. And I was like, that is so true. If it's only going to save me $50 a month to put that extra 10, I'd rather keep that on hand. And that's exactly what I did. And I'm so glad I did because I struggled for a couple months, about 6 or 7 months on the mortgage payment. Not struggled. It was a higher payment than what was comfortable as a new homeowner, as a first-time homeowner. But I was able to refinance 7 or 8 months later and save myself about $400 per month.
Oh.
So it all really worked out.
Okay.
So I don't think it's necessary. In some cases, sure, it might make the loan scenario work out better where you're getting a lower monthly payment because you're putting more down. But in the example that I just gave, I had that extra $10,000. It wasn't worth it to me to just save an extra $50 a month when I personally would rather have that on hand to help with expenses as they come up. So it's a personal decision, but you got to know the numbers and you have to know that data really helps you with that decision making.
And that advice was given to you by your lender?
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
Look at them.
Yep.
Okay. You should wait to buy a home until you can afford it.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. If you can't afford to buy a home, don't buy a home, right? But I think what a lot of people think without talking to a professional is that they can't afford to buy a home.
Right.
again, both cases, both times for me, I didn't think I could afford it. And then after talking with an agent, a lender, both times I was like, oh, shit, I actually can afford. Let's do this. If I could afford it, I'd rather pay my own mortgage than someone else's. So, yeah, that's true. If you can't afford a home, to buy a home, don't buy a home.
Yeah. Buying a home is cheaper and better than renting.
So that one's complicated. I will say there's parts of that are true and false. You know, I'll just, again, use myself as an example, right? The last place I rented before the place I own now, I'm absolutely saving money because my rent alone was probably going up $300, $400 when they would increase it each year, when right now my mortgage payment only goes up probably $40 to $50 a year, and that's only because my property taxes went up that year. I have a fixed rate mortgage, so my mortgage payment doesn't change, the principal and the interest, but I escrow my taxes and my homeowner's insurance into that, and taxes and insurance fluctuate each year. So I save money by being an owner in that way, and also, I don't have to save necessarily to buy the next place. I can if I want to. I am. Do I have to? Not necessarily, since I already own one asset and could sell it and use those proceeds to buy the next one. If I was still renting, I'd be paying rent, and I wouldn't have a choice. I'd have to be saving.
That's a good point.
On top of that, right? But as a homeowner, I mean, you're responsible for when things go wrong. So as a renter, like if there's something wrong with the toilet or plumbing or whatever, you can typically call maintenance or your landlord, and it's on them to fix, right? But as a homeowner, like, no, that's on you.
Right.
I didn't buy a fixer-upper by any means, so it's just regular stuff that I have to pay for. So I would say I'm definitely saving money and have been saving money every time I've owned versus rented. But it depends on what you're buying. If you're buying a fixer-upper, right, like that's obviously going to cost money. And I'm just talking very across the board there. So I think it just depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't buy a home with student loans. True or false?
That's false.
Okay.
That's false, but I do know, unfortunately, student loan payments can be just off the charts high, right? It all comes down to the debt to income ratio if you're working with a lender. If your debt to income ratio is too high because your student loan payments are so high that it's disqualifying you from having room in your budget to also pay a mortgage, then sure, that can ruin it, right? But at least when I was a lender, and this was a long time ago, but I do know that for different student loan programs, different lenders would see things differently. So if someone had like an income-based student loan where they don't owe it yet, but they're gonna owe it later, maybe or maybe not, we would count that loan payment against them because they're not gonna be charged that payment so far out. Now, if they're currently making that payment, does that still fit into their debt to income ratio? The lender at the end of the day wants to know that you have the ability to repay the loan. Yeah. It's all in the best interest of the consumer. Do you have room to pay this comfortably? Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So like follow up, when you're getting pre-approved and you have student loans, does that heavily impact how much you get approved for?
It just depends.
Okay.
I think, so if I'm hearing this correctly, it sounds like the overall question is just like, are student loans bad for when you're, no, not at all. Yeah. Not at all. Having a student loan, now having a collection is very different. Like lenders are concerned about credit worthiness in terms of like, are you someone who goes delinquent on their payments, meaning you don't make your payments on time? You haven't made a payment so long that it went to collections. Like delinquencies are what they don't want to see. Yeah. Just because you have a student loan isn't a bad thing. They want to see, if you have one, that you've been making on-time payments, and that even with a new mortgage payment, that it's not gonna make you go delinquent on a mortgage because you have student loans and a new mortgage on top of it. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, good.
Buying a fixer-upper will save you money.
Again, it depends. And honestly, I would probably say false, because initially, right, like, you're going to have to pour money into fixing
Sure.
up the home. Now, if you're buying it to fix it and flip it, now a lot of people do that because they plan to immediately flip it, meaning sell it for a higher price to someone. Now, in that case, you're making money, but you have to put forth the money first and follow through with that plan. Now, if you're just fixing it up to make it your dream home, that can be a great thing too, even if that is your forever for now home. Like, you're just making the home worth more than what it was when you bought it, which is more money in your pocket down the line for when you do go to sell it.
Right.
Or if you just want to rent it out to someone, like a newly renovated property, you can rent it out for a higher monthly price to someone than you would some like a property with, cabinets from the 70s or the 80s. It's just more marketable when you're able to say, like, new finishes, modern, this, that. So, yeah.
True or false, if a property is on the market for a long time, something's wrong with it?
I think that's such a fair assumption to make, but it is false. It doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong with the property, but it is a clue. It's a clue that you should look into. It's a clue if you're working with your agent that you should ask them about. There's many different things that can contribute to that. One thing that comes to example, just because I do come from a military family, is the house in an area with where there's a military base. A lot of people in the military who are active duty move every 3 to 5 years. So in that case, not super weird. Now, if there's not like an obvious reason, it's definitely worth looking into, but I would call it more a clue versus a red flag or just a default bad thing.
Yeah. Last, true or false.
Okay.
Regarding new construction, you can probably skip the home inspection.
Skip the home inspection on new construction? Falsies.
Oh.
False, guys. Yeah, you should still do a home inspection on new construction. Believe it or not, there can be things that are really wrong with the home on a new construction. These are all brand new appliances. Maybe they weren't installed properly. I once did a closing at a brand new construction home. Like we closed the buyer there at the home. And unfortunately, he had not completely wrapped up the final inspection portion of it, and the vents were not fully covering the hole in the floor for the vent itself. So, like, the metal grating that goes over it.
Right.
I've known people who bought new construction where when the shower glass doors were installed, they weren't wide enough. So there was a massive opening of where water could get out. There's so many different things that could go wrong on a new construction. It's just different kinds of things, right? On a home inspection on a pre-existing property, it's typically stuff that might just be due to the home having had a lot of owners or just being used over time, right? But on a new construction, it could be things like, was this properly installed? Was it the right fixture that we ordered? I've seen that situation too, where we ordered gold fixtures and we ended up with brass fixtures. So still very important to do a home inspection on a new construction property.
Like little things I feel that you don't really see.
There can be so many little things.
Yeah.
New construction, as glamorous as it sounds, it's a whole different ball game of potential issues that can come up.
Right.
It's not to scare anyone. It's just to take the glam away from new construction. Like, it's still a process that you want to go through. You shouldn't cut corners necessarily just because, brand new, what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
A lot, babes.
Yeah.
A lot, so look out for yourself and
for sure
for your asset, especially if it's brand new. You want to make sure that everything's working. Everything is what you ordered, if you had a choice in the matter, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, fam, Kat's got some no dumb questions for me because there are no dumb questions in real estate. So what you got for me, girl?
So in what case would someone want to refi? I hear about refis here.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that?
Why are we doing that? Yeah, great question. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's a couple different reasons why someone would want to refinance. When someone's refinancing, they already own their home. They're already the homeowner. They already went through the purchase process. When I was a lender, I often saw two types of refinances: an interest rate reduction, loan or a cash out refinance. So in the first case, someone might have purchased the home at a 6.5% interest rate, and maybe 2 years later, the interest rate's down to 5.5%, a whole percentage rate lower, and they want to talk to a lender about refinancing into a lower rate mortgage, which will save them a lot of money on a monthly basis. So that's one reason to do a refi or refinance. A second reason, another refi that I would see all the time as a lender is called a cash out refinance, where someone is essentially taking out the equity that they've built in their property. So they're not necessarily refinancing to get a lower rate. They want the cash. They need cash, and their home is an asset that they've built equity into. Some of the most common reasons I would see borrowers needing to take out cash out refinance was to pay for a son or daughter, granddaughter's college tuition, or maybe they want to add on a patio to the back of the house. So there's a few different reasons to refinance, but those are probably the two that I see the most often.
Okay. What I've been told as Gen Z, we're told the first step to buying a house is to get pre-approved. Do you go to a lender to get pre-approved?
Yes.
Who are we going to?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be a lender that you would get pre-approved with. And I mean, you can talk to a real estate agent first, but oftentimes an agent's going to want to know, like, are you already working with a lender? Agents aren't going to start showing you houses until you have that pre-approval. Because the pre-approval from a lender is going to tell you, and the people that you're working with, your agent, that you're a serious buyer who can afford to buy a home at these limitations or at these prices. So pre-approval is something that you would get from a lender that you're talking to.
Okay. Okay, is Zillow really that accurate?
No, I would not rely on Zillow for accurate information. At the end of the day, like, you know, no shade on any agent, of course. And again, I've never been an agent, so I can't speak for how it works, but a lot of it's like data entry from a real person and relying on third-party sources to put that info in. So Zillow is not the most reliable place to get information. I mean, I remember when I purchased my last property, the HOA payment was listed as one, and it was actually $100 higher based on the actual HOA documents.
Okay.
The listing on Zillow had it from the year before's monthly HOA payment. You know, so yeah, you can't fully rely on Zillow for that information.
Okay. So is an attorney legally required to conduct the closing?
Great question. If it's an attorney state, then yes. In attorney states, you know, in the title world, there's title states or attorney states. Kat and I are currently sitting in the title district, the DMV, Maryland, Virginia, DC. These are all title states. DC's not a state, but you know what I mean. And then there's states that are attorney states like West Virginia, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And in those states, an attorney is legally required to conduct and handle the closing. But in title states, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be done by an attorney per se. But we are backed by attorneys, and we've got great attorneys on staff.
All right, last question.
Okay.
If I want to sell my home, where do I start?
Great question. You want to sell your home?
Yeah.
Talk to a real estate agent.
Okay.
Talk to a real estate agent. Please do not try to do it on your own. I mean, by all means, try if you'd really like to. But at the end of the day, it is best to talk to a real estate agent who understands the current market, who understands the best strategy to list your home, how your home's going to be listed, how it's going to be marketed, what avenues, how are people going to see the property, coordinating showings, open houses, negotiations, offers, writing up contracts. That's really hard to do if you don't have the expertise to do it. So the first thing I would do if you're thinking about selling your home is talk to a real estate agent. Thanks for the questions, Kat.
Yeah,
these were really good.
of course.
How'd I do on the true or false and the
Great.
amazing?
No, yeah.
Gold star.
Yeah.
Gold star. Thanks for doing this with me.
Of